The fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, casting that familiar sickly glow across the checkered floor of Denny's. It was almost 2 a.m., and the last customer had finally paid their bill and stumbled out into the night. I'd been working these late shifts for nearly 6 months now, trying to save up enough for community college while my friends were already off at state universities. The late shift wasn't glamorous, but it paid slightly better, and the tips weren't terrible. Plus, for the past few weeks, I'd had a reason to look forward to these long nights. His name was Jake. Jake had started about a month ago, transferring from another location across town. He was about my height, with dark, curly hair that fell just above his eyes when he wasn't wearing the mandatory visor. He had this easy confidence that I envied, the kind that made customers smile even when he told them the ice cream machine was broken again. We'd fallen into an easy rhythm working together, covering for each other when one of us needed a break, splitting the difficult customers, and sharing eye rolls across the dining room when someone was being particularly demanding. Tonight had been unusually busy for a Tuesday. A bus had broken down nearby, and we'd suddenly found ourselves serving 20 hungry and irritated travelers. By the time they left, the place looked like a hurricane had hit it. Food scraps littered the tables, napkins were strewn across the floor, and somehow, someone had managed to spill an entire milkshake across 3 different booths. "Man, I thought they'd never leave," Jake said, leaning against the counter and wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "I swear that guy in the red hat asked for hot sauce 7 different times." I laughed, remembering how the man had complained that each bottle wasn't hot enough. "Yeah, and then didn't even leave a tip. Classic." "All right," Jake sighed, stretching his arms above his head. I tried not to notice the way his uniform shirt rode up slightly, revealing a sliver of skin above his waistband. "Let's get this place cleaned up so we can get out of here before the sun rises." We worked in comfortable silence for a while, me wiping down tables while Jake swept the floors. The only sounds were the quiet hum of the refrigerators and the occasional clatter of dishes as we cleared them away. There was something intimate about being the only 2 people in a space designed for crowds, like we were sharing a secret the daylight customers would never understand. "You know what's weird?" Jake said suddenly, breaking the silence. "I actually kind of like this part of the shift. Everything's quiet, no one's yelling for refills, and it's just peaceful, I guess." I nodded, understanding exactly what he meant. "It's like we're the only 2 people awake in the world," I replied, immediately feeling self-conscious about how poetic that sounded. But Jake just smiled. "Exactly," he said, and our eyes met for a moment longer than usual before I quickly looked away, focusing intently on a particularly stubborn ketchup stain. We finished cleaning the dining area and moved on to the kitchen. Jake was telling me about his dog, a rescue pit bull named Daisy who was afraid of the vacuum cleaner but would fearlessly chase squirrels twice her size. The way his face lit up when he talked about her made something warm unfurl in my chest. "You should meet her sometime," he said casually as he wiped down the grill. "She loves meeting new people. Maybe you could come over after a shift one day. I've got a decent collection of movies, and my roommate's usually out with his girlfriend." My heart did a little skip. Was he just being friendly, or was this something more? I'd been trying to read the signals for weeks now. The way his hand sometimes lingered when he passed me a plate, how he always seemed to find reasons to stand close to me when we were working, the way he laughed a little too hard at my terrible jokes. But I'd been wrong before, and the last thing I wanted was to make things awkward between us. "Yeah, that sounds great," I managed to say, hoping my voice sounded normal. "I love dogs." Jake grinned. "Cool. Maybe after Friday's shift? We're both off Saturday." I nodded, already mentally planning what I would wear, then immediately feeling ridiculous for it. It was just hanging out, not a date. Probably. By the time we finished cleaning the kitchen, it was nearly 3 a.m. My feet were aching, and I could feel the beginnings of a headache forming behind my eyes. All I wanted was to go home, take a hot shower, and collapse into bed. But at the same time, I wasn't quite ready for the night to end, for this bubble of just me and Jake to burst. "I think that's everything," Jake said, surveying our work. "Just need to count the register, and we can get out of here." I nodded and went to grab my jacket from the back room while Jake dealt with the cash. When I returned, he was by the front door, keys in hand. He reached up and flipped the sign from open to locked with a dramatic flourish. "And another day at America's favorite diner comes to a close," he announced in a mock announcer voice that made me laugh despite my exhaustion. But then something changed. Instead of heading straight to the door as usual, Jake turned to face me. The playful smile had faded from his face, replaced by something more serious, more intense. The air between us suddenly felt charged, like the moment before a thunderstorm. "Can I ask you something?" he said, his voice quieter than before. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. "Have you ever?" He started, then paused, running a hand through his hair. "God, this is going to sound so weird, but I feel like there's something here." He gestured between us. Am I crazy? Am I reading this all wrong? My heart was hammering against my ribs so hard I was sure he could hear it. This was the moment I'd been simultaneously hoping for and dreading for weeks. I could lie, laugh it off, preserve our easy friendship and working relationship. Or I could tell the truth and risk everything. "You're not crazy," I said finally, my voice barely above a whisper. I felt it too. The relief that washed over his face was almost comical. "Oh, thank God," he breathed. "I've been driving myself insane trying to figure out if you were just being nice or if you might actually be interested in me." I thought I was being so obvious, I admitted with a small laugh. "My friend Mia says I have all the subtlety of a neon sign." Jake took a step closer to me. "For the record," he said, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth, "I am very interested in you. Have been since that first shift when you showed me how to work that impossible coffee machine and didn't laugh when I spilled an entire pot all over myself." "It was a close call," I teased. "You look like you'd just gone swimming in the world's worst pool." He laughed, and I noticed how the sound made the knot of tension in my shoulders loosen. We were still us, still Jake and me, just with this new layer of honesty between us. "So what now?" I asked, suddenly aware of how close we were standing. Jake's eyes searched mine. "Now," he said slowly, "I'd really like to kiss you, if that's okay." Instead of answering, I closed the distance between us, pressing my lips to his. His surprise lasted only a second before he was kissing me back, his hand coming up to cup my cheek. It was gentle and tentative at first, both of us testing the waters of this new territory. But then his other arm wrapped around my waist, pulling me closer, and the kiss deepened, became more urgent. When we finally broke apart, both slightly breathless, Jake rested his forehead against mine. "I've been wanting to do that for weeks," he confessed. "Me too," I admitted. "I just never thought you'd actually be interested in someone like me." Jake pulled back slightly, his brow furrowed. "What do you mean, someone like you?" I shrugged, suddenly self-conscious. "You know, I'm just ordinary. Nothing special. And you're—" I gestured vaguely at him, at his easy charm and good looks. "Are you kidding me?" Jake looked genuinely perplexed. "You're amazing. You're smart and funny and kind, even to customers who definitely don't deserve it. You remember how everyone likes their coffee, and you always save the last blueberry muffin for Mrs. Chun when she comes in on Thursdays. And when you laugh, really laugh, not that polite customer service laugh, it's like—" He trailed off, a slight blush coloring his cheeks. "I sound like an idiot." "No," I said quickly, something warm blooming in my chest. "No, you don't." We stood there for a moment, just looking at each other, as if seeing each other clearly for the first time. Then Jake glanced at his watch and grimaced. "It's almost 3:30, he said reluctantly. "We should probably get going before we turn into pumpkins or something." I nodded, though part of me wanted to stay in this moment forever, in our little locked diner with the world shut out. "Rain check on that movie night with Daisy?" I asked. Jake's smile returned, bright and genuine. "Absolutely. Though fair warning, she's a bed hog, and she snores." "I think I can handle it," I said, smiling back. We gathered our things, and Jake locked up behind us. The night air was cool and crisp, a welcome change from the stuffy diner. The parking lot was empty except for our two cars, parked side by side under a flickering streetlight. "So," Jake said, jingling his keys nervously, "I'll see you tomorrow night." "Same time, same place," I confirmed. He hesitated for a moment, then leaned in for another quick kiss that left me feeling lightheaded. "Good night," he murmured against my lips. "Good night," I echoed. I watched him walk to his car, a slightly dazed smile on my face. As I got into my own vehicle, I couldn't help but think about how different the diner would feel tomorrow night. Same fluorescent lights, same checkered floor, same greasy food, but everything had changed. The next evening, I arrived at work 15 minutes early, having spent an embarrassing amount of time deciding what to wear under my uniform. Jake was already there, chatting with Marta, the evening shift manager. When he saw me, his face lit up in a way that made my stomach flip. "Hey," he said as I approached, his voice casual but his eyes saying so much more. "Hey yourself," I replied, trying to match his tone despite the butterflies in my stomach. Marta looked between us with narrowed eyes. "You two are chipper for people about to work an 8-hour shift," she commented suspiciously. Jake just shrugged. "Must be the coffee," he said, winking at me when Marta turned away. The shift started busy and stayed that way. Friday nights always brought in the post-movie crowd and people starting their weekends with late-night pancakes. Jake and I moved around each other with practiced ease, but now there was an electric undercurrent to every brushed hand, every shared glance. Twice I caught him looking at me from across the diner, a small smile playing on his lips that made me nearly drop the plates I was carrying. During our break, we squeezed into the same side of a booth in the back corner, shoulders touching as we shared a plate of fries. "So," Jake said, bumping his shoulder against mine. "Still on for tomorrow? I promise Daisy will be on her best behavior." "Definitely," I replied, trying to ignore the way my heart raced at the thought of being alone with him, away from the diner and our uniforms. "What time should I come over?" "How about noon? We could get lunch first, maybe take Daisy to the park if the weather's nice." It sounded so much like a date that I couldn't help the grin that spread across my face. "That sounds perfect." The rest of the shift passed in a blur of coffee refills and late-night orders. By the time the last customer left and we flipped the sign to locked again, I was exhausted but buzzing with anticipation for tomorrow. Cleaning up went faster than usual, both of us energized despite the late hour. As Jake counted the register, I found myself watching him, the way his brow furrowed in concentration, the way he mouthed numbers to himself as he counted. It was strange to think that just 24 hours ago, I'd been agonizing over whether he might ever see me as more than just a coworker. When everything was done and we stood by our cars once again, there was none of the hesitation from the night before. Jake pulled me close, his arms wrapping around my waist as he kissed me deeply. I melted into him, my hands finding their way to his hair, finally free from that ridiculous visor. "I've been wanting to do that all night," he murmured when we finally broke apart. "Do you know how hard it is to focus on taking orders when all I can think about is kissing you?" I laughed, feeling light and giddy. "I nearly poured coffee into someone's lap 3 different times because you smiled at me." He grinned, clearly pleased with this information. "Just wait until tomorrow when I don't have to pretend I'm not completely into you." The promise in his voice sent a shiver down my spine. "I can't wait," I said honestly. We reluctantly said our goodnights, with one more kiss that left me dizzy. As I drove home, I couldn't stop smiling, thinking about how differently this shift had ended compared to all the others before it. For the first time in months, I wasn't just going through the motions, waiting for something better to come along. Something better had already arrived, in the form of a curly-haired boy with a crooked smile who made even the late shift at Denny's feel like exactly where I was supposed to be. The next day, as I stood on Jake's doorstep, I felt a flutter of nerves. This was different from the diner. This was real life, without the buffer of work to fall back on if things got awkward. But then the door swung open, and there was Jake, looking so different in jeans and a soft blue t-shirt instead of his uniform, and all my worries melted away. "Hi," he said, his smile as bright as ever. "Hi," I replied, suddenly shy. And then a blur of tan fur barreled past Jake's legs and launched itself at me, nearly knocking me over. "Daisy, down, girl," Jake called, looking mortified as he tried to pull the excited pit bull away from me. "I'm so sorry. She gets excited about new people." I laughed, kneeling down to let Daisy sniff my hand properly. "It's okay. Hi there, Daisy. I've heard a lot about you." Daisy responded by licking my face enthusiastically, making Jake groan. Great first impression days. Really smooth. But as I stood up, wiping dog slobber from my cheek and laughing, Jake was looking at me with such warmth that I knew this was just the beginning of something wonderful. He reached out and took my hand, pulling me gently inside and closing the door behind us. "Welcome to my place," he said, suddenly looking a bit nervous. "It's not much, but it's perfect," I told him and meant it. And as he led me through his apartment, Daisy trotting happily at our heels, I couldn't help but think about how sometimes the most extraordinary beginnings happen in the most ordinary places. like a late-night diner with flickering fluorescent lights, where two guys finished the late shift, one flipped the sign to locked, and both of their lives changed forever. Total _char_count, 17,824.